Till Death Do We Volley is the 19th episode of the 4th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. For the most part, I didn't like it. The journey wasn't very good, but the destination was pretty brilliant, apart from the last few seconds, which I really didn't like. So I'll talk about these as we go through the episode. I don't have that many thoughts, but definitely towards the end. Dorothy's very excited. She's going to meet up with an old friend, Trudy. Trudy arrives, and they just seem to be throwing insults at each other to the extent where, a second after I thought that, Blanche said, "This might not be my place, but you two hardly sound like old friends." And they do have a very bickering way of communicating, and Dorothy suggests they play tennis, and I did enjoy this. Trudy said, "Yes, you pathetic middle-aged cow," to which Dorothy responded, calling her a miserable sack of cellulite. But I have to say it's a pretty great insult. And they go and play tennis, and Sophia, Blanche and Rose are watching. Nice way to bring those characters in. And off screen, all we find out is that Trudy's dead. She died. And Dorothy feels really, really guilty. She suggested tennis. She feels like if she hadn't made Trudy do something so physically exerting, she wouldn't have died, which may or may not be true. And then Blanche tells a story that wasn't that interesting, but it did end with an amusing line. "Years later, to get back at me, Kathy Lee slept with my daddy," which was not where I thought the story was going. So, slow story, but not a bad conclusion. And unfortunately, they're actually having a reunion, as Dorothy and Trudy had initially decided they would have a reunion. Also, I forgot to point out, Trudy is played by Anne Francis. I forgot to mention that. And they were planning on having this reunion, getting everybody together, but they didn't cancel it because obviously it would be very last minute. So everybody is there, and Dorothy has to tell them that Trudy died, but she's hiding in her room. She doesn't want to do this, understandably. So Sophia tells her a story, and Dorothy realizes she just has to get on with this, so she goes out to tell them. And she can't, and she basically crumbles, and she tells Sophia she can't do it, and Sophia immediately steps in to help her daughter, which was really lovely. And she did it in true Sophia style, just very bluntly, saying Trudy's dead. And Dorothy is just a mess, and she runs out of the room, and then there's a knock at the door, and Rose says, "Darn, someone's late. Dorothy will have to give her speech all over again," which would be pretty cruel to make Dorothy go through that again. And this is the point from which I thought it got interesting. Up until this point, it wasn't very funny. There were a few moments, as I've mentioned, but it wasn't the most entertaining. But from this point, it was so unpredictable, so unexpected, that for the most part, I really enjoyed it, because at the door is Trudy. And my first and really my only thought at that point was, how? What on earth? How is this possible? And we find out that actually it was a practical joke. This is how they communicated when they were younger, with bickering and practical jokes, pulling pranks on each other. And this was one giant, horrible prank. And everybody else said to her, "That's absolutely despicable." So Trudy said, "Fair enough, if it was really that bad, I'll apologise to Dorothy." So she goes to Dorothy's bedroom and opens the door, and Dorothy is in there with her husband, with Trudy's husband. Dorothy says, "How come you're alive?" To which Trudy obviously responds, "How come you're in bed with my husband?" I think Dorothy's question was definitely the most important of the two. Also, I hadn't expected to see that, and Trudy was really annoyed by this. Not that she had any right to be annoyed. And then Dorothy and Trudy's husband pull back the covers, the bed covers. They're fully clothed. Dorothy had a suspicion that this was a prank, so she asked Jack for the details, and Jack finally confessed that this was a prank Trudy was pulling. Dorothy convinced Jack to pull the prank on Trudy and pretend to sleep together. So I rather liked the way it went. I wasn't expecting it, and it was an absolute roller coaster. The only thing I didn't like, by which I mean I absolutely hated, is right at the very end, Rose and Blanche are really annoyed at Dorothy because Dorothy knew about this, but she let them believe that she was absolutely distraught. Now, it's not completely clear when Dorothy had this suspicion, but I feel like she genuinely was devastated for some time. I don't think she was pretending to be overcome with guilt for the most part, but obviously eventually she managed to get this out of Jack, and I feel like Blanche pretending that Dorothy's pain caused her pain, which then in turn caused Dorothy some genuine pain because she felt bad for doing that to Blanche and Rose. It is a trick too far, because Blanche then did a couple of seconds later come back into the bedroom and reveal that she wasn't hurt by what Dorothy had done. She was just pranking her, and I feel like anything that causes somebody to feel bad or guilty is not a good prank. It's not a good trick to pull on somebody, and I really, really detest it. So I really hated that ending there. But I guess on the plus side, Blanche made it clear quite quickly that she didn't feel this genuinely and that she was only joking. Rose, maybe not. Rose kind of did walk away, so who knows. But yeah, I didn't love those last few seconds, but I'd say from the point of Trudy arriving until just before the ending, it was pretty great. So kind of slow, not the funniest apart from a few small things here and there, but ultimately it was quite an experience. And Till Death Do We Volley, while it may not be my favourite episode, is definitely not too bad. It ended up being a pretty good, definitely very surprising episode of The Golden Girls.